warrant this evening that we'll be going through, as well as the Community Preservation Act articles. I'll be doing some of the articles. The Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Matt Lane, and Selectman Bill Plasko will be taking the majority of the special town meeting articles. And we have Joe Sheehan from the Community Preservation Committee who will be going through the CPC articles. As we've done in the past, the last few nights of these sessions, if you have any questions, feel free to just raise your hand. Those of you joining us remotely, just either type something in the chat or let us know you want to speak and we'll grab your question. If we get a lot of questions, we'll get through all the slides and then get to the end. Everyone will stay here through the end, so you can also ask questions at the end if something doesn't come up as we go through an individual slide. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the Selectmen, Matt Lane and Bill Plasko. You guys are going to go ahead and kick us off.
Great, thank you.
So like any other quicker back and forth.
You didn't say there was going to be technology.
There is.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Lane. I'm the chairman of the board. Of course, Bill Plasko. So is the best way to do this, Tony, is read these or?
I would think so. Yeah, we presenters have sort of been standing there as we make use of the space.
Okay, great. Here we go. Welcome to the meeting about a meeting. Okay. Article 1. So I'll just read the language of it very quickly, and I think Mr. Plasko is going to lead off on this one, and we'll kind of go back and forth to see if the town will vote to reinstate its acceptance of sections 42, 43, and 44 of Chapter 48 of the Massachusetts General Laws, providing for the establishment of the fire department to be under control of an officer to be known as the chief of the fire department, which acceptance was voted by the March 24th, 1926 Norwood Special Town Meeting under Article 12. This would reverse the vote to revoke the strong chief law made by the town meeting on November 19th, 2020.
Thank you. This is a petition article that was brought forward by President of the Union, Paul Ronco, and we haven't got exactly the genesis of their reason to bring it forward. We're still Chairman's trying to arrange for some meetings so we can talk and understand their concerns and see if we can find some common ground on this matter. But in the yellow sheet you received, we did state that we're opposed to this action, basically because we believe that it would make no material changes in the administration of the department, which is what the act is about. And the chapter of the law is about the structure and the oversight by the fire chief of the department. We don't believe that would make any changes from the way we're doing things today, and that to adopt it and have it on the books would cause unnecessary confusion when read separately from our Special Act of 1914, commonly referred to as the Town Charter. Now, we'll just go over a few of the reasons why we feel that way, and I think it's important to point out here some of the history. Just so you're aware, there's been quite a bit of history on this topic. In 1914, we adopted our town charter, and we didn't have a full-time department. We had a call department, volunteer type department that was under some fire engineers. In 1926, the selectmen thought that the town's property value and census population was such that it deserved to have a full-time fire chief overseeing the operations of fire department to protect the town residents and their property. So they went to town and adopted Chapter 48, Section 42, and set up the fire department. In 2012, the selectmen decided it was time to operate the department in accordance with Chapter 197 of the Act of 1914, the charter. And the board sought town meeting to rescind the Act of 1926 to avoid confusion that I just mentioned a moment ago. Because when you read them, two laws that have provisions that seem to conflict, it just causes confusion, potential arguments, legal actions. We don't believe we need any of that, particularly where we feel confident in our position that the charter prevails. So again, town meeting did go along with that. Town meeting did support that action. Rescinded the act of Chapter 48, Section 42, and the fire department's been operating since then, 2012, directly under our charter. And 2013, there was an attempt to go back again like we are at this moment, but town meeting rejected that attempt and stayed with operating under our charter. So the petitioner's article, the Strong Chief Act, I want to first mention that you won't find a definition of strong chief anywhere. It's just kind of slang. It's been associated over the years with this particular act, but it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's really a little inaccurate. The chief isn't strong under this act, as the title or the reference to it would seem, and we'll try to cover that a little bit, what we mean by that. The charter is a special act of the legislature by itself, and 4842 is again a separate law of the Commonwealth, and it doesn't contain as a standard provision, notwithstanding any other law, a special act to the contrary. 4842 does not have that language. Therefore, when you read the two, you have to read the two separate laws together and their opposing provisions and see how they work together. And when you do that, again, we believe the charter clearly prevails. So the appointment, I've got to go over some of the issues that are over the years in different towns in Norwood considered important matters that are covered by the law and how they differ from one law to the other. So appointment is an important one. 4842 states that the fire department is under control of an officer to be known as the chief of the department, and he shall be appointed by the selectmen. Well, if adopted, in theory, we'd have a chief appointed by the selectmen, but however, in accordance with section 8 of our charter, the general manager is the administrative head of all departments of town government, the contract which is governed by general laws, chapter 4842, and by the act placed upon the selectmen. So anywhere you read our charter that says we're in charge of a department head or something, it's the general manager's position that's in charge, not the selectmen. So nothing will change. The act says appointed by the selectmen, it's going to be appointed by the manager. Appointed by the manager is how it is handled today. There'll be no substantial change there. Removal is always a concern, whether there's politics involved, how the chief gets removed. It's always been looked at, there's some protection under 4842 because it says you can only be removed by cause, for cause, after hearing by selectmen. That doesn't change. Again, it would be read to be the general manager because he has control over all the that would otherwise be selectmen. And the charter provides in section 9 that superintendents and chiefs of department shall not be removed by the general manager except on 5 days notice in writing, which shall state the cause for such removal. Again, the cause is essential. The chief's contract, also a standard contract used in Massachusetts, states a term to be terminated for cause during the contract. And for the purpose of the contract, cause shall mean any grounds put forth by the general manager in good faith is not arbitrary or irrelevant to the task of maintaining an efficient and effective fire department. So it cannot be removed for arbitrary reasons. It all has to be directly involved with his administration of the department. And another point too is that in Mass General Law, public employees have basically a property right to their jobs. Nobody can be released except for cause. There needs to be cause, there needs to be hearings before anybody can be terminated. This is a couple of, the left-hand side is pretty much taken from the law, what duties and authorities the chief has. And again, you'll see a couple of them are subject to selectmen. The left-hand side is duties from the charter, responsibilities of the chief, from his contract. And the wording is different, but if you take the time to read them, the same issues are covered, the same authority. And I'd like to read you the starting paragraph from the section of the contract that has to do with functions and duties of the fire chief. The administrative control of the fire department shall be the responsibility of the fire chief. The fire chief shall perform the duties and functions normally associated with the position of fire chief as provided in Massachusetts general laws, rules and regulations, and the Commonwealth, and the bylaws of the town of Norwood. Such duties shall include, but not be limited to, those set forth. First one is commands of the department, and the others are pretty much highlighted here on this slide for you. I'll go to the next one, Tony. So specific duties that were listed on the last slide says that the chief shall appoint the deputy chief in such office as firemen, I said firemen back in those days, as he may think necessary, and he shall fix the compensation of all permanent members of the department, again, subject to approval. This is just how things are done today. The law doesn't say anything really different than the charter, the contract and practice. Furthermore, an understanding how much authority the chief has or doesn't have legally. The Supreme Court, Massachusetts Supreme Court, in the case in 1976, concluded that the selectmen are the ultimate bargaining authority of police and fire departments, and that they, the selectmen, must bargain subjects that would otherwise be under the control of the fire chief. So this statute 4842 is really outdated. It's largely made irrelevant by the current bargaining regulations, the laws, and decisions of the court. In addition, our charter places compensation setting under the general manager. And again, that's subject to contract approval by the selectmen and personnel policies. Progress in the fire department. Over the, we're talking the structure and of the department. And I don't believe the structure that we're operating under today has in any way been a detriment to the progress of the department. Over the last 5 years, we've added a deputy chief position, a second fire inspection position, created 4 additional lieutenant positions to reduce the span of control, all to more modernize and accurately reflect the best practices in the industry and standards. And a lot of this was accomplished by the chief because he had the assistance of the general manager, the support of the general manager, to convince the selectmen, convince town meeting to give the funding to create these positions. It's a lot different than the chief is out there alone and has no support. We've also added in the last 5 years, 2 new engines, 3 new ambulances, replaced the command vehicle. We now have an operating budget that are budget management. We've added a second AOS ambulance, $140,000 was invested in in-house vehicle maintenance tools. $4 million was invested in new HVAC system, and $350,000 was spent by the town to renovate the kitchen. So we're taking care of the department. We're addressing the department. I don't think there's been any major points made to us that anything that's being neglected and addressing the department's needs. And lastly, we make the argument that legal standing is with the charter. We asked town council to review our position, and he has determined that when you read the sections together, that the charter would prevail. So we believe there'll be no changes in the way we are running the department today. So we'll continue to have the manager the appointments, the general oversight. The chief will still manage the day-to-day operations of the department as he does today and has always. Nobody's ever tried to step in and say, you have to change things. You have to cut manpower or anything else. There's been talk about that. There's been studies about that. But that was just information made available to the chief. Chief hasn't done anything and nobody's tried to persuade him otherwise. No one's tried to put any political pressure. So nothing will change. The chief is in control of the department. But if we have 2 laws that seem to conflict on the books, then somebody might decide they're going to read this one this way and try to fight. A manager could sue because somebody's trying to go over his authority. The chief could sue because he thinks they're going over his authority, and we end up in court and battles for no reason. We think the case is strong, that things should stay exactly the way they are, and I hope you agree.
Great. So John, do we have any questions for anyone?
Yeah, and we'll come back at the end as a wrap up too, if there's no questions, no hand raised.
Okay, and I think too, not to put you on the spot, Paul, but the petitioners are potentially gonna have their own information section on this article, if possible.
Yes.
Which I think is great. I think, if we can get perspective from petitioner, that will be helpful too.
Is it all right to ask a question now?
Can we do a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, okay.
Okay, I agree that we have a wonderful fire department, which I greatly appreciate. So I'm really trying to pay attention to this article. So, I feel that it's necessary for the manager and the selectmen and the fire chief and the department to have a really good rapport. And that's been a little tenuous at times, and I hope it's better. So one way in my head that I could find an example of this is, for example, the end of my street, Endicott Street, a few years ago, we had cease and desist. And on that day, I spoke to the manager and the fire chief. They were both wonderful. So what if there's a conflict on whether the fire chief thinks there should be a cease and desist and a business closed down, but the manager says no? Or suppose we had that gas leak at the food mart there on the other side of Norwood, the frozen food place. There was a bad gas leak. I forget the type of gas, and it was on the news and everything. And what if the fire chief says, I think we need to evacuate this neighborhood within a half-mile radius, and the manager says no? See, I see those kinds of emergency management responses, that kind of dialogue. So how can you assure me as a resident that everything's fine the way it is without the fire chief being the superior authority?
Because the chief has those authorities. As we read, he's in command, he follows the laws of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth gives those authorities to the fire chief. They don't give them to the general manager.
There's a
They give
difference
them to the fire
between,
chief.
there's a difference between executive authority and statutory authority.
Okay.
I employ every police officer in the town of Norwood. They report to me through the chief. I hire them, I fire them. I don't have the legal authority to arrest anyone. Only a police officer is vested with that authority. It's the same thing with the building inspector. I can't inspect a building. I can't tell you, I wouldn't know how to do it to begin with, but I can't tell him this inspection is good or not good. It's the same thing with the town accountant. Town accountant reports to me, it's my employee. I hire them, I supervise them, but I can't make an entry into our books. It's the same thing with the school superintendent and his teachers. He can set a curriculum with the policy of the school committee, but he doesn't tell them, no, your next test is going to be on Friday versus Thursday. So we have that all throughout all of our operations. The town clerk, I can supervise the town clerk's office. The clerk's appointed by the board, reports to the manager. I don't certify an election. Only Mary Lou can do that. Virtually every department we have, people have independent statutory authority. Nobody can tell the town accountant how to do a journal entry on the books. State law gives her that authority. Same authority that's given to the fire chief. Same authority that's given to every police officer in town. You can appeal a parking ticket to me, but I can't give you a parking ticket. And that's the same across every department and division in town.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I needed to know, because that's the kind of conflict I was wondering about. And I watched the other meeting the other night, and I've always felt in Norwood, and I think we've gotten a little laid back since 9/11, and I remember, God bless him, Bernie Cooper, I thought was in charge of civil defense, but where is our global picture if we had a really big event in terms of, a townwide emergency response plan? And are there towns who have strong chiefs? Is it a thing?
Yeah, so the strong chief refers to the appointing authority. Who appoints the chief and whether he appoints subordinate firefighters. It's no difference in the actual authority of a control over an emergency. The way the town approaches an event, we set up an incident command system based on who's in charge of that event. Is really, you have the town's emergency management team. It's based on what type of event it is. So certainly a large explosion, a large fire, it's obviously going to be the fire chief. The police chief's not going to do it. The manager's not going to do it. During the pandemic, we had an emergency management team. Public health made most of the decisions because it was a public health decision. The fire chief, the police chief, and I, we all sat there and said, I can't tell you how many feet you should stay heck away from somebody than you.
Right.
Have a cold. If it was not that manhunts happen, they do occasionally. Well, who's in charge of something like that? Of course, it's going to be the police chief. If it's general flooding, you could have the DPW director in charge if you have roads blocked, depending on the actual type of situation. So it's whoever's wheelhouse it ends up falling in. If you think of the June 2020 storm, that was really call it a team effort. The fire department coordinated the evacuation of the hospital. Of course they would. The DPW and the light department busy during that storm? Absolutely. So it's really whoever the incident is most appropriate to. We're not going to send the police department to a huge fire and tell them to be in charge of it, nor if, God forbid, there was a a public safety incident, a criminal incident, we're not gonna send the fire department to handle that. So it's really whoever's in charge of, relevant to the incident. The home market foods you bring up, perfect example. Of course, the fire department's gonna be in charge of an incident like that. Police take their step back. They'll take their commands from the fire chief as needed, just as if it was a different situation.
Thank you.
Yes. Paul Ronco, local 1631, Norwood Firefighters Union President. Just had a couple of questions. One is, where do the fire chiefs of Association of Massachusetts, where do they stand as far as supporting strong chief or weak chief?
FCAM, I haven't looked into what FCAM stance on it is.
I can tell you they support the strong chief. As far as who's going to be the chief is answering to, I think that's where this is all coming from. Had a question on regionalized dispatch. Chief Dave Hayes, initially was against regionalized dispatch. And
At the time the decision was made, Chief Maurice was in charge of the department, and he and Chief Brooks both wanted to do it. We wouldn't have done it if both chiefs hadn't wanted to do it. Dave had been chief earlier, maybe he would have said, no, I really don't want to do that. Chief Hayes also really wanted to go with Holbrook instead of Foxborough, which is where we ended up. It wasn't because of that, but that's just where the cookies crumble, so to speak.
I think that situation right there, if the fire chief, whether he wanted to go regionalized dispatch, or I'm just using that as an example, he should have brought that to the Board of Selectmen and not to the town manager.
We
The
brought it
Board
up
of
to the
Selectmen should be able to voice that to the people that are actually going to be voting at town meeting.
and that did happen. The chief brought it to me, and then it was brought to the Board of Selectmen.
The other thing we have to remember here is we're talking laws, and unless we change the Act of 1914, it's not gonna have any legal effect. That's where the rub is between the two. The chiefs, they may be looking at the law itself and think it gives a certain amount of authority, but they have to read it, as I said earlier, with the charter, and that's where the rub is. There is a charter, but that's quite an exercise and wouldn't be responsive to the article at this time.
Well, just see on that slide staring right at me, it's going to have no practical impact, is saying changing.
I'm sorry, my
If
hearing.
there's no impact on changing it, what's the difference one way or the other?
As I mentioned, if we had two laws in 2012. The selectmen, we're changing chiefs. With all the controversy, we're changing chiefs. And the general manager always had the belief that he should be appointing fire chief. He convinced the selectmen that that's right. That's what the charter says. That's how it should operate. It shouldn't be a department unto itself. It should be working as part of the family, the government family, with our police department and everybody else and the general administration to work more effectively. And therefore, we were going to start operating, have him hire the new chief and operate accordingly. But we felt that because there was a history of using 4842, it would be clearer to everybody if we went to town meeting and got rid of 4842, so there weren't two laws in conflict on the books. Because, as I said earlier, if you have those two laws in the book, the chief could start acting independently of the manager, and the manager goes to court to to prove he has the authority. If the manager's operating and the selectmen think they have the authority, one party sues the other. This happens in towns all the time. We have a couple of examples in Mansfield alone where one party sues the other and everything to try to get things straightened up. We don't need that drama, particularly if we can see how it works out and it's not going to be, change anything. Why have it on the book so that even if we all understood it today, 5 years from now, we're not around, other people around, all of a sudden they have the questions, well, gee, this says this, I think it says that, and they have conflicts to straighten out. So why put another law on the books if it's not going to have any effect?
I think since this happened 10 years ago. All the slides are very nice. It paints a very good picture of where we're at, all the improvements and everything throughout the fire department, but it's never been worse in the 28 years that I've been there.
It's never been what?
Since the 28 years that I've worked there, it's never been worse than the last 5+ years.
Well, I think I don't
This is
think
just
we
gonna
should- I don't
take
think we should get
politics
into
out
this
of
too
it.
much tonight. It's not really pertinent, but I think we're talking more personalities and humans versus structure. We're talking legal structure. And how the legal structure works always depends on the individual, the human being. And those are things we have to work together on, but structurally, legally, we shouldn't have two things conflicting with each other.
Yes.
A quick question. One would think that the second law would supersede the first law. Okay, but we could have another law come on board which would supersede the prior law. So I'm confused in that when you have a law, okay, it changes things, updates things, whatever. It supersedes the existing. Apparently it doesn't in this
The
case.
second law might have a stronger argument, a stronger legal standing if it had those words, notwithstanding any other law or special acts to the contrary. 48, 42 does not have that language. So it has to be read with the charter. So it's not really a matter of which supersedes, it's interpreting it. Like I said, the law says the selectmen will appoint. But then in practicality, we go to our charter that says, in layman's terms, we're delegating that authority to the manager. So today, the manager hires the fire chief. If we adopt this law, it's gonna be the same thing.
So apparently the second law,
It's reading together, not really superseding, if you want.
It's important to know all cities and towns in Massachusetts are political subdivisions of the state, meaning we're not actually an independent town. We are a creation of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. All cities and towns are. The state has a statutory framework that if you had 0 bylaws and you didn't have a charter or special act, that's what every town operates under. A special act, our special act, is an act of the legislature. It specifically dictates how Norwood is allowed to act and deviate from any number of these special law, any number of state laws. The legislature, in theory, can grant you a special act to go around any other state law that you want to, but that's also an act of the legislature specifically granting Norwood this level of authority, this type of government structure. Other towns establish these things through bylaws, and that's just a local law, in which case the state law always supports, is always superior to that. But it's a state law that says this is how Norwood should act.
okay. All right, thank you.
So I'm a little bit confused about the actual wording, the yes and the no on this. So a vote of no would be to keep things the way that they are now. Is that correct?
Would be to keep,
Right.
the vote no would be to not adopt that law and have just our charter prevail. We get into the argument, if you will, if we adopt it. Does it still follow
So
the
a
charter
vote
or not?
no would be to leave things as they are right now.
Correct, because it's a local option, so you vote affirmatively to approve a local option.
Okay, I think you might want to clarify that when stating this to
Tell me.
everybody, because it's a little bit.
Or don't.
It is.
Forgive me if I got this wrong. As I understand it, the storm chief would remove Tony from being able to do what?
Nothing. Wouldn't change anything.
And how does this differ from what the police have in their structure?
Currently, there's no difference. In theory, this local option,
There are,
having not had a charter, would be that the police chief reports directly to the selectmen and the manager is completely out of the picture.
Is that what you're saying?
I was gonna say, there are special laws, as we call the Strong Chief Act, that refers specifically to police too. But we never adopted those, and it's specifically addressed in our charter. It wasn't specifically addressed, the fire chief position wasn't specifically addressed in our charter, because that was adopted in 1914, we didn't have a full-time fire department. That didn't come on
Yeah,
until
I get all that.
1926.
I just don't understand. Forgive me. I don't want to take up too much time, but there must be a reason that they put this forward. Yeah, I don't understand what that reason is.
As I said at the beginning, we haven't 100% have the genesis of their reasoning why they want to bring it forward. Chairman's trying to get together so we can understand that before we get to town meeting. They're gonna have a session, they'll try to explain it if they're able to have that session. And hopefully we all get together and have something clear at town meeting for that. Tonight, we don't really have all those answers. But obviously they see something wrong. They think this is a mechanism. We're not saying there isn't something wrong, but we don't think this is a mechanism to change anything.
Okay. Okay. Paul, you're good? Okay. Okay, so we'll move on. To Articles 2 through 4. So those also are on petition of citizen. I think Mr. Hey, okay. Joe Sheehan's going to help out on this one as a member of the planning board. I'll just read them very quickly though. These all involve zoning changes. Article 2, to see if the town will vote to amend the official zoning map by changing the zoning district designation for properties at Assessor's Map 18, Block 5, Lots 1 through 6 from Providence, Boston Highway District to single residence, or take any other action in the matter. Article 3, to see if the town will vote to amend the official zoning map by changing the zoning district designation for property at Assessor's Map 18, Block 4, Lot 1 from Boston Providence Highway District to single residence, or take any other action in the matter. And Article 4, to see if the town will vote to amend the official zoning map by changing the zoning district designation for properties at Assessor's Map 18, Block 6, Lots 1 through 3, Map 18, Block 6, Lot 30, Map 18, Block 6, Lot 34 through 80, Map 18, Block 7, Lot 17, Map 18, Block 7, Lots 41, 46, 47, 49, 51, Map 18, Block 9, Lot 83, Map 18, Block 11, Lot 82 from Boston Providence Highway District to general residence. Okay, let me get out of the way.
Okay, the proponent brought this forward to the Board of Selectmen, and they did put it on the warrant. And we had a meeting the other night on it, and the vote on it was not to approve this, and it was a 4 against approving or recommending this the town meeting, and 1 abstention. And this property is all properties that are around the Pendergast Circle. They wanted to change it. It was changed over to the Norwood Providence Highway District, probably within the last 2 years, I think. And the proponent thought that they should be changed for actually several reasons. And I think you can let her explain what's the town meeting. If there's any questions.
So,
Yes,
say the vote was, what was the vote? Not to approve these or not to approve these?
yes, not to recommend that they
What
go
was the vote?
for, everyone was, 4 was against and 1 abstention.
Abstention, okay, sorry. Is there a particular genre for a reason why, without bogging down the meeting yet?
We had just
The planning board decided not to support this.
We had just approved the change within the last 2 years to have it go on the Providence Highway District. And they wanted to change this particular.
One area is the telco property, for instance, that it's included in the Boston Providence District, and I think they want to change it to just residential. And it's a citizen, it's not that property owner petitioning to get it
Well,
done.
it's my backyard, so. I don't know.
Yeah, and I just to chime in too, Selectmen to similar vote, not to support. And again, for similar reasons, that it was just done so recently, but also that the petition was not coming from someone that the property owner in those districts, but from a citizen, which isn't to say that citizen had the right to bring this forward. And, we look forward to their argument for at town meeting. Question online.
The Economic Development Committee also voted to recommend changing the zoning back, leaving it as it is. And that has to do with the belief that these particular parcels are situated in an area that is more appropriate for commercial development and increasing the town's commercial tax base. They're strictly This is mine.
We have a question online. Ellie, if you had a question. You can go ahead and unmute.
Yes, I was wondering where exactly these parcels are. Hello?
Sorry, can't really hear anything that you're saying.
I was asking where the parcels are.
Right. What, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, much better.
Okay, so there's three different parcels. I'm not even sure, which order they're in, but one parcel is at Lower Manhattan Street, just before you get to the Pendergast Circle, the rotary over Route 1. And it's on the left-hand side if you're going from Norwood Center to Route 1. Years ago, it was called the Mason Nailing property. More recently, it's been the Telco property. There are a number of separate lots that make up that whole general area. They're all under the same ownership. And the petitioner is trying to take that out of the Boston Providence district that the town meeting approved just a couple of years ago and put it back to being residential. Now, today it's not residential. Today it's manufacturing, but they want to change it to, or she's proposing to change it to residential. The same as in the area, there's some multifamily housing and there's some, I think it's general residence, and she's proposing to go back to the general residence. Or to go to the general residence. It's never been general residence. It was always manufacturing. All women in manufacturing, one of the two. I'm sorry, I don't know which. The other one, two, are on the other side of Route 1 in the same general area, going north from the Pendergast Circle. And it's near what's recently been approved for a enterprise automobile rental and sales. And it abuts that property. And the neighbors have concerns about that. And they think that, generally saying, they think that the zoning was done without them knowing it and it should have been rezoned. So they're trying to get a change back to single residence, which is what their homes, their neighborhoods are zoned. And there's one third parcel that abuts the ones I'm just talking about. It happens to be town-owned property, and it's even closer up the ramp to the Pendergast Circle Rotary. So they're both right, all three parcels are right around the Pendergast Rotary.
Again, just a reminder, these are citizens, this was a citizen's petition that was put forward. That particular resident may submit information to town meeting or will make a presentation at town meeting.
Any other questions? Yeah, great work.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay.
Internal transfers, you want to handle that, Mr. Manager?
Sure, just to be, I'll be brief. We've spoken about this the last few nights. Every year, at the end of the year, any transfers the town has to make within its budget come before town meeting. The whole list, I believe, is in the yellow sheet. The school department is able to make transfers throughout the year within their budget. On the town side, if we have a budget, we have a salary line and operating line. We can't move in between those two, and we can't move money from one department to another to balance out the budget at the end of the year. So we couldn't take money from the DPW budget and put it into the police budget, or take money from the fire department and put it into the clerk's office. We have to bring that to town meeting. So this article is a standard article that comes every year that authorizes transfers to balance the budget towards the end of the year.
You don't have a slide with the list?
We have it on the yellow sheet. We did not see it, and if you want to pull it up, by the time I do that. Yeah, but, all four. Yeah.
And I think it
Sorry,
would
it's
help
hard
you.
to look backwards.
Sorry, John.
You're good, Peter.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, hold on a second. I don't think anyone at home can see it. We have to stay on the slide for the rest of it. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this is the actual list of internal transfers.
Okay. The reason why I asked this is a lot of money, and I think that people need to have a little bit of a review on this before town meeting.
Sure, so that's what we're here for. First item is vehicle maintenance at the police department. Second item is or uniforms for new officers. It does cost a certain amount of money to equip a new officer, depending on how many you bring in a given year. We can budget for a certain amount, but obviously some years you might hire 5, some years you might hire 8, some years we hire none. Next couple of items related to the fire department. The first large number there is just a retro from a settled contract. So when we settle a contract, we obviously provide retro pay back to when that contract would have been affected. We try to do our best to plan these out ahead of time, but sometimes you can't plan 3 or 4 years exactly how much you're going to need down the road. The second item there is for substitution at the fire department. We discussed this in the budget a little bit last night. If you have folks who are injured, we generally staff at 15 firefighters, won't go below 14, but we do need to replace people to maintain our staffing level. That substitution number tends to oscillate quite a bit a year. Again, one firefighter being out injured or on long-term sick or in the academy can lead to significant cost. It's just a cost we have to bear to keep the department operating. Next, we just have the sick and vacation payout for the fire chief who retired. By law in Massachusetts, any vacation time somebody has when they are employed, they're required to be paid out. We generally don't let folks accrue more than their maximum 6 weeks of vacation. So somebody can't accrue 58 weeks of vacation. And our sick time payout, we actually only pay 25% of somebody's sick time, 100 days. So it's actually generally not that much. But when you have a 30-year employee who may have 200 sick days, it still equates to sometimes 5, 6, 7 weeks of pay. So we would like at some point to budget for compensated absences in the town. Rather than at the end of the year, we're always moving money around for them. We're looking at ways to do that. But again, some years it's a much higher number. Some years it's a much lower number. I know 5 years ago, we had one employee who had 470 sick days, and they retired, and somebody worked for us for 40 years and really never taken a sick day. The last two, the training number there, we've had 2 individuals in paramedic school most of the year. It does take quite a while. We talked about it last night with the fire budget to actually train a paramedic. We try to send 2 to school per year. It does come at a cost. We made adjustments in the budget going forward for that, but paramedics are so valuable that if we had an opportunity, we're always going to take it. The cemetery number there, again, 2 long-term retirements at the cemetery. There's accumulated sick and vacation time there. And the last is an invoice for the finance and accounting office. We were having an issue with deductions that we had to have one of our audit vendors come in and correct the issue for us. In terms of where the funds are coming from, that whole first list that says shortfall, that's just existing budgets, existing items within the general government budget that we're projecting to have a surplus in. We're closing up a couple of capital projects. That means projects that we have appropriated money for, we have completed the projects, and there's money left in those funds. And then there's a couple of repurposing of some projects that are either not going to happen or not going to happen in the near term. Some of those were left in the capital plan and appropriated either right before COVID and sort of the world change, or they were projects that prior to the facilities department, we had to plan out differently. And now with the facilities department, when the time comes to do them, we'll be able to do them a little bit easier and certainly at a lower cost. And the top and the bottom column matches. I don't know if you can see it up there, just on my screen. It's not showing the bottom.
Any other questions on that article? Anything online, John? Are we good?
Nope.
I have one.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know when the capital outlay was supposed to meet on those articles. Have they met?
They're meeting this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, we should go to the next slide. There you go.
That's great. Does that work?
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, we didn't go through the process in reverse.
Article 6 is to see if the town will vote to rescind the appropriation of the sum of $110,000 for renovation of the lobby at the Civic Center voted by the October 18th, 2021 special town meeting under Article 2, and to increase by the sum of $110,000 the appropriation for renovation of the women's locker room voted by the October 18th, 2021 special town meeting under Article 2. I think we have some pictures too. So these were two capital projects funded. Renovation of the Civic Center lobby, $110,000. Renovation of the Civic Center women's locker room, $210,000. In an attempt to reduce costs, the two projects were combined into a single bid, which came out well in over budget. The locker room project has been prioritized over the lobby project. Some of that has to do with the leadership in the department change, and the new director, the new recreation superintendent felt that the locker room was more of a priority. Article requests that funds be merged from lobby renovation to locker room project. It will not add any new taxpayer money. Any unneeded funds would be returned to town as free cash when the project is complete. And these are pictures of the women's locker room currently, in the state that it's in. And if you remember, how many years ago did we do the men's? 4. The women's locker room was supposed to happen, this was 5. And this is the men's locker room, so obviously, you know, we would like them to be on par with each other.
The women's locker room was supposed to be done in closer order, but it was right around when it was supposed to go on, and a lot of things ended up getting canceled.
Are there specific questions on this article? Okay, anything online, John? Okay, great. Article number 7 is to see if the town will vote to abandon a sewer drainage easement on the parcel identified by book 4235, page 83, Norwood Tire, 55 Lennox Street, or take any other action in the matter. Mr. Manager, if you would not.
Sure. This is the former Norwood Tire property. The town owns a drainage easement and actually a drain that we no longer use going across the property. The town's been approached. Somebody wants to buy the property and redevelop it. It's within the central business district. We would need to abandon that easement for that to happen. Engineering has reviewed it and determined the town does not need that easement. Any costs associated with this will be paid for by the new property owner. The town owns easements all throughout all of our 10 square miles, probably thousands of them. And time to time, it's not uncommon for us to be approached by somebody who may need us to abandon or release an easement. And if we're able to do it, we are. In this case, we're able to do it. There was work done there, making that drainage easement in the drain effectively not necessary for the town. So we would propose going forward and doing that with all the costs or any costs being paid by the
Right, that's the key. We're not paying anything. Correct.
and we don't need it.
So that's what we're talking about, and John took those photos today on the right-hand side, so. Still for sale?
No, I believe it's, they've got a PNS.
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna close until they know they can get rid of it. You're not gonna be able to do anything with the property realistically. Even the owners had approached the town about a year ago, letting us know they were gonna sell it. The existing building has certainly reached the end of its life cycle. We were sad to see the business go. They've been in business in town for a long time, but they were happy to retire. So for that property to have any kind of redevelopment, we're likely gonna have to get rid of the drainage easement, unfortunately. So, we have a question online. Doris, if you want to unmute and go ahead.
Hi, I want to know if there's any hazmat material that has gone down into that drainage system. Are we going to be responsible, the town, or is that going to come on to the new owner?
We wouldn't be responsible. So this is just a drain pipe that we have. Is it possible that something can go into the storm drain? Certainly, we're always telling people, please don't dump chemicals anywhere on your driveway. That can all flow into the storm drain system. So if there's any contamination on that site, we are in no way responsible for it. It's 100% the property owner.
Okay, thank you.
And he'd be responsible for abating that prior to any construction in accordance with state law.
Great, any other questions? Article 8, it's to determine whether the town will appropriate a sum of money to pay costs of upgrading the municipal light department's distribution system transfer capability to provide a redundant level of reliability to a large industrial customer of the light department currently engaged in expanding its presence within the town, including the payment of all costs incidental and related thereto, subject to the appropriate recovery of such costs through rates and charges applied under the oversight of the Board of Selectmen in their capacity as electric light commissioners and pursuant to one or more agreements with the customer acceptable to the light commissioners by borrowing or otherwise, or take any other action in the matter. So this is a large industrial customer. Currently, we are providing power to them. They're requesting approval to borrow up to $7 million, which isn't to say that that would be the total cost of the project, but we're just giving ourselves some cover there. The infrastructure for degree of reliability requested, so that's the redundancy. They have current power and they need to stay on all the time. And they want to be able to ensure that if they lost their primary power, they would have a backup source. Instead of me talking about this, we are lucky enough to have Kevin Shaughnessy, the superintendent of the light department here, to answer any questions. Sorry to put you on the spot, Kevin. But some of the things that we had questions as the Board of Selectmen, the borrowing we do and the infrastructure and everything that is built is town owned. So if this industrial customer decided to leave or stop the project, we would not lose any money. And we anticipate about a 10-year agreement for paying back the cost of the project, which would be built into the rates.
Yeah, we have to negotiate an energy service agreement. If that, essentially the town part of it, the part that we would borrow, we would recover, we recover the principal and interest payments. And that could be the 10-year part. But you have to remember that what we're doing is cables, underground conduits and manholes and things like that, which would have a longer lifespan than 10 years. So it'll be amortized over a longer period of time. But essentially, if they were to leave or they didn't want it or whatever happened, we would have assurance with letter of credit or whatever we decide to make sure we can recover those costs. So it's essentially because it's a general obligation bond, we have to get permission from town meeting.
Questions?
Can we say where this project is gonna take place and who the owner of the property is?
It's a large plot along 1A.
I mean, our council said it.
Sure, we try not to, identify customers. It's just part, just if you had a service to your house, we wouldn't tell anyone we're going to Steve's house for a service. I would never say that, but a large industrial plot along 1A.
Someone at the recent town meeting said they were doing God's work. So.
Yeah, that's true.
I did hear that.
I think Ed Ferris had a question online. Ed, if you want to unmute, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So the question is, the borrowing is for $7 million. We know it's going to be under a 10-year contract. We know there's going to be interest associated. And the assumption is we're going to recoup over the 10 years. Is there any margin in there that we're actually might make money off of or lose money on, based on how this shakes out? Because obviously it is a big project.
Well, we certainly won't lose any money. If there's the next slide, I don't know if it shows the cost. This is an engineered estimate for what the work that we're gonna do. I don't think, we asking for 7 just in case the bids come in high. We still have to negotiate what we expect them to pay. So there's a couple of things that are still up in the air that we may pay for because we will use the infrastructure ourselves. In other words, there's a substation on this property that they will no longer need if we go with the plan that they're proposing. But we won't need it for them, I should say, but we can use it for something else. So we would probably assume some of those costs, and that still has to be negotiated. I think it's, in my mind, that's probably closer to 6 million. We're asking in case the bids come in higher, but certainly what happens is in this agreement, they still pay the normal charge for an industrial customer, but we would expect them to pay this additional cost as part of their bill. Because I don't know if I answered your question, Ed.
Actually, you're close. We're going to get the 8% margin.
That's correct.
Cost.
Yeah, that's correct. We will, in addition to P&I and the infrastructure, we are allowed as you know, to make, so-called profit. So
Right,
yes,
exactly. So I'm trying to calculate out after $7 million investment, what our potential within that 8% margin might be.
yeah, well, you know, I wasn't gonna probably talk about this, but one of the reasons that I wanted to do it this way, and the board, I think, supports this, is we probably have enough money in depreciation, but because of doing it this way, we can do just what you said. So that allows us to, you know, make our return on this investment.
Right, I'm just thinking of it as the town could see it as new revenue.
Sure.
Well, the light department can see it as new revenue.
Yes, but we do get a small piece of that, so. All right, thank you.
And they've been paying all along, so the engineer part of this, and then I'll talk about, they pay for that, they pay for some of our time. So they've been good to work with.
Brian Palmetier has a question. Brian, if you want to unmute and go ahead. Brian, you can go ahead once you unmute. You can also use the chat. Do that. Brian, can you unmute and go ahead with your question? Maybe not. Okay, we can always come back at any time, and Kevin will be here. Why don't we grab Ms. Esco had a question?
Yeah. I just was wondering, has Norwood Light Department ever done this before, anything like this before with the customer? Is
Not
this the
that I'm
first
aware
time?
of. We've had customers, you know, Polaroid, the hospital, where we've had a unique service that goes underground from our substation, which I think is beyond what we would normally
Yeah.
provide, but we haven't had a separate energy service.
So do you project that you would need to hire, and it would be in the cost, hire extra staff? This seems like a huge project to add to your department without extra people.
No, we go out to bid and we would have contractors doing this work. I mean, we may get like a clerk of the works, a temporary person to oversee it, but we would be part of this
Right.
cost. I think it's even in.
You know, so it's a huge project, and I can understand the necessity of it. Do you know if there's any sort of template for agreements with any other municipalities who have light departments who have maybe done a customer agreement like this before?
Yes, the attorney that prepared the agreement does these all across the country. This is not an unusual thing. This scale is a little bit different for us. Again, we're 10 square miles. We're comparatively a small community. It's very common rest of the country, and that all gets taken care of by our light department attorneys. And as Kevin said, we've done smaller projects. This is particularly larger.
Yeah, I gave them this company an ESA that was from our attorney. It was just something he had done, but it was a huge fertilizer plant. And so we're getting, because they don't seem to, their staff, I think they have legal staff, you know, they mostly do patent law, so they need to get an energy attorney. But what I'm trying to say is that we've given them a template, so to speak, and we're gonna get them a better one that's more just for this job. So we can share that once we have this. I want to look at it, of course.
Just as an aside, does the new Norwood Hospital need any sort of extra redundancy, or?
Well,
What are they?
they've had 2 feeds there, you know, and I've been here for almost 40 years. They've always had that. They haven't asked for anything additional.
Okay.
So we'll just
Thank you.
continue to provide them what they always have.
Yes.
You mentioned something interesting. I think you said that we're guaranteed not to lose any money. I think you said that.
Yes.
And is that true, you're setting up an escrow? I'm not talking about the light department, I'm saying generally speaking. You set up an escrow, or is it insured in case that project goes to bump? Now, where's your guarantee is, I guess what I'm getting at.
So that we haven't, I think I said, we haven't negotiated an agreement with them, but it would typically be a letter of credit. They could post cash. They actually were talking about wanting to try and pay for this upfront, which we're not really interested in, that because of the bid laws and so forth. So, but you're right. We will make sure that we have assurance. I'm not quite sure whether it'd be a letter of credit. It could be if they could post a cap bond. It could do any number of things to make sure that we're made whole should they decide.
So even though you're still in negotiation, I guess a couple of things on the table would be perhaps some sort of an escrow or an insurance policy against that.
Right, it probably won't go much further without, when we go out to bid and we have real numbers.
Yeah.
Then we would our attorney would negotiate with their attorney, then we have to go back to the board and, get their approval, are they okay with?
Sure.
Yeah, we're not comfortable that the town's guaranteed assured, we don't have something in place, whatever that mechanism might be, this, as we just discussed, a couple options it could be, but if we're not comfortable with that, project won't go forward. This is giving them the ability to move forward in a timely manner. But there's nothing that says we have to go forward if we're not satisfied. So we'll have all those documents before we authorize it to go forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? John, are we good on? Great, thank you. Oh, sorry, we had another slide for you. Sorry. No, it's okay. Right, so you can see the timeline for the agreement there. Sometime in September. Great. Okay, Article 9, to see what sum of money the town will vote to transfer from surplus revenue or other available funds and appropriate for the acquisition of school information technology equipment and transportation vehicle or take any other action in the matter. This is a request to appropriate $117,000 from free cash to fund network switch replacements and computer labs at the high school. I don't ask you about network switches. School information technology requests come at a different time than general governments due to their E-rate funding timeline, which allows the school department to secure goods at lower cost and partial funding for the project. So when we made the decision a few years ago, Tony, for capital, we envisioned that these are the types of things that were going to come to us.
Yeah, there's always a possibility that certain capital items, when there's a need, it's going to come up at the next available town meeting. And that's with the 2 minibuses, the schools are facing a challenge with special ed student transportation. And the IT work, the school systems are able to apply for grant funding that usually covers a significant amount of IT work every year. They don't always know in November exactly what that grant cycle is going to be. So if we did it in November, we'd sort of be putting up some money and kind of guessing. They try to match their needs with what the most grant funding will end up having. So doing it in May gives them a little bit of an advantage in that way.
Are there questions on this article? Good. Okay. Article 10.
The school.
Yeah, another school item. This one is for contract services for the school study. To see what sum of money the town will vote to transfer from surplus revenue or other available funds and appropriate for contract services to perform elementary school study or take any other action in the matter. So for those of you that don't know, the new middle school that we're building, we're going to have a groundbreaking in June. Actually, pretty exciting, but that school will be 5 through 8. So obviously the elementary schools we have now are 1st through 5th. At the time when we first started talking about a new middle school, obviously there was some, and there were studies to show that it was a need. So moving 5th grade up to the middle school was a need, but it didn't really dig deeper than that. And so that's what this would do. This would talk more about the current and future capacity needs across the 6 elementary schools as students move to grade 5. The new middle school in 2025, the school department needs to devise a plan for addressing the complex needs of the student population. Are there specific questions on this? Anyone at home? Great. Probably second week back.
Debt service. You want to?
Sure.
This is kind of a technical correction we're making. Go ahead.
Correct. Not an additional appropriation. We moved our water and sewer funds into an enterprise fund, which is a best practice in financial management. And initially, all of the debt service for our DPW buildings paid partially by the general fund and partially by water and sewer, since it's used by both. And there was just a miscalculation where it all showed as water debt. It needs to show as water and sewer debt. It's no net change. It's just something we need to bring to town meeting to correct the enterprise fund going forward. We did something similar in November. We'll probably have a couple more of these technical corrections. It's rare for a town to have operated a water sewer system for so long and then go to an enterprise fund. So there's always a couple of hiccups until you kind of get it set right.
Questions?
The next article is, we're gonna read the article, it's basically just asking to do a review of our general bylaws and to make some corrections having to do with headers, Roman numerals, consistency in numbering. This is all necessary so that we can update and digitize our bylaws. And at this time, we're not talking about any changes other than those type of corrections. There's probably a lot of changes. A lot of us could go through the bylaws and point out we think are outdated and need to be made. But we're not going to try to confuse the issue by doing that now. We'll do this part of the project and then come back with suggestions for a committee or whatever to really analyze or review the bylaws and make those kind of recommendations in the future.
Any questions? Article 13, to see if the town will vote to authorize the Conservation Commission or the Board of Selectmen to apply for and accept a grant or grants under the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund Act and to enter into any contracts necessary for park development improvements at the same street lot, also known as the Burning Cooper Waterfront Park, located on land shown on the Norwood Assessor's map, or take any action. Town meeting voted to allocate full funding for the development of Cooper Park in May 2022. Cost to be split between community preservation and the general fund. The town has since received notice of having been awarded grant funds from the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund Act for $717,650. Grant program still requires town meeting approval to accept the funds before being able to apply for reimbursements. We want to accept the funds. Town meeting vote is unusual for grants, is required in this instance. Mr. Rizzo, do you have any more on this?
Nope, it's just we were able to receive grant funding. If the project comes in where its target budget is, then this funding still gets applied and the remaining funds that are unused will get split back between what is free cash for the general fund and community preservation funds. It also gives us a significant buffer in the event there's any cost overruns in the $1.5 million that were appropriated. So great job. Actually, Holly Jones, our environmental planner, was the one who was able to secure this grant funding. So great work.
All right, did we get that right, Holly?
Yeah.
Yep. So, I can add I think the reason the Land and Water Conservation Fund wants the legislative body of the town to act on this, is to really make a town meeting aware that accepting the funds, and using them for the park, means that we have to preserve the park for the conservation and recreation use, in perpetuity. And if it ever becomes used for something else, then the town would be required to replace it. Exactly. And so this vote is actually going to be recorded along with our project agreement on the deed for the park, so that will be enforceable moving forward. In the case of the Cooper Park, there's a bunch of other mechanisms that are already doing the same thing, including the use of our CPA funds for it. So it doesn't impose really any new burden.
Thank you, Holly. Article 14, unpaid bills, Mr. Mizuko.
Sure. Annually, the appropriation law in Massachusetts requires that any bill that's not paid in an existing fiscal year, it can be as simple as something gets left in a desk or it gets billed late. We have to bring it back as an unpaid bill to town meeting the following year. We typically do this every year in May and sometimes in November. I think the school department had some unpaid bills in November that literally somebody had retired and they've gone in a desk draw. What we often see is our fiscal year closes on June 30th. We have to make any final entries on our books by July 15th, which means even if we're waiting for an invoice and we call the vendor, we say, send it, please send that invoice, please send an invoice. If they send it on July 16th, we are legally obligated to pay it. However, we no longer have an appropriation to pay for it, and it has to wait to a town meeting. So it's it's a standard annual article every year in May and sometimes in November to pay a leftover prior bill from previous fiscal year.
Great. Okay, so that's it for special town meeting articles. We'll take a little time to go through the Community Preservation Act articles. So that's on the annual articles 8 through 10. We've got Joe Sheehan here, who's also the chair of the Community Preservation Committee. We got a lot of info, so I don't know if the best way.
Joe, do you want to just take the whole thing, or do you and Chris want to split it?
Yeah, we can just do them together.
Sure.
Bill left us, so.
Yeah, good. Okay, I'm Joe Sheehan, Chair of the Community Preservation Committee, and the CPC has 3 articles before town meeting. And this slide here is our Article 8 distributes fiscal year 24 estimated revenues to 5 different reserve funds specified in the CPA line. The CPA requires that 10% of estimated revenues be dedicated to each of the 3 categories. 1 would be community housing, 2 would be historical resources, and 3 would be open space and recreation. And the statute allows for up to 5% to be used for administrative expenses of the CPC. Remaining funds in Norwood's case is there's 65% are set aside for use across any of the 3 use categories. So that would be the undesignated in the pie chart. Prior to distributing funds to each of the reserve funds, estimated revenues for the coming fiscal year must be calculated. There are 2 parts to CPA revenues. The first one is the local surcharge revenue. That's the 1%. At this time, we have 1% here in Norwood, a surcharge on property taxes. The second is the distribution from Mass Community Preservation Trust Fund. That would be the state fund that would provide that. The former is calculated using the actual surcharge revenues from the last fiscal year 22, multiplied by the 2.5% levy limit. That would be, I believe, from Proposition 2.5 years ago. So this year we would look at what's estimated, and that would be $771,577 times 1.025, which gives us conservatively a $790,866. The state match is the percentage match of the surcharge collections from the prior fiscal year. So fiscal year 24 match is equals fiscal year 23 surcharge distribution percentage. As fiscal year 23 is not yet closed, estimated fiscal year 23 revenue of $764,607 was used as the first factor. So that was multiplied by that same 1.025. As the only guidance from the Department of Revenue about the fiscal year 24 match was to use a conservative percentage to settle on a 10% match estimate. Multiplying these 2 factors results in an estimated match of $76,460. The next slide is total estimate revenue in this sum of the 2 funding sources, $867,326. This is the number that is split between the reserve funds according to the percentage outlined in the CPA statute. These amounts can be seen in the chart and will be noted in the motion for Article 8. If you look down in the far corner, that number there is that's the amount that we have now, $3,496,377. That's before we spend anything coming up this year. The CPA funds not spent on projects remain in the reserve funds to which they were appropriated. This chart shows the balance in each fund before and after the distribution of fiscal year 24 estimated revenues.
I'm everyone ahead of you, right? Sorry,
There it is.
sorry.
Yeah, so if you see now, you can see community housing, reserve fund balance. You can see each of them as you read across: historic resources, open space and recreation, and then unrestricted CPA funds. Those unrestricted funds can be used for any of the 3, but the 10% is put in each year and it builds up those accounts until we do get to use them. And the estimated revenue for the reserve fund balances, if you read across those, that's what that is. And I think the chart is, you can see where the money is at this point.
Article 9 simply makes available for spending the dollar amount appropriated to the fund reserved for administrative and operating expenses. Unlike other reserve funds, this amount is only available for one fiscal year, and any money remaining at the close of fiscal year 24 is swept into the undesignated fund reserve. Article 10 is where each of the project recommendations approved by the Community Preservation Committee are considered. A summary of this year's recommendations is shown here, but will be presented separately in a moment. A total of 9 projects across all 3 funding categories are being put forward at a total cost of $1,159,040. Each project is presented in a separate motion. Town meeting may take one of 3 actions on each motion. The project can be approved as proposed. The project can be approved at a reduced funding level, and the project can be rejected. As you know, here we cannot add funding to any of those proposals. The first motion on this we're seeking funds of $350,000 for community housing.
I'm all over the place.
Yep, for a community housing project proposed by the Norwood Housing Authority to replace windows and siding at the McDonough Housing Complex. The McDonough Complex provides 152 units of affordable housing. The windows, which were installed in 1968, are missing seals and are no longer weather tight, and the aluminum siding has delaminated from the substrate. CPA funds will be used as a match to pursue other grant funds from the Mass Department of Housing and Community Development.
Great, and maybe we could take questions on individual projects if that's easier. Does anyone have a question about this particular project?
We can certainly circle back at the end too.
Okay.
Okay. Abe, go ahead.
Yeah, where is the McDonough housing complex rather?
Well, we're lucky enough to have a former employee of the Housing Authority here.
McDonough Housing Authority, you might just more commonly call it the Manhattan Street housing. As you're going towards Route 1 on the right-hand side from town. It was renamed a few years ago in honor of a longtime former Commissioner Phyllis McDonough. So it's actually the McDonough Housing Complex at Manhattan Village.
I don't know the address on it. That's what I was asking.
The community hall is 86. I believe the numbers run from 36 to 94. Manhattan Street, all even numbers.
Great. Any other questions? And I think, Kristen, this is the first housing project we've had, correct?
There were 2 smaller ones last
this is-
year.
this is the first significant.
The Regional Housing Service Organization, but this is the first major housing.
Yeah, so it's pretty exciting. Great. Article 10, motion 2.
Seeks funding of $5,000 for a historical resources project proposed by the town manager's office to restore and preserve the 1890 history and directory book. This project is similar in scope to the restoration of annual town reports, and funding will be used to have this recently donated document professionally repaired and preserved by a qualified conservator. We have had some, I think last year we did some similar projects.
Right, with annual reports, yep. Mr. Rizzuto, we had an example. We don't have it here, do we?
We did not. It's really just what they do is they rebind the books and they clean them up. They use all the special chemicals that restoration office use, and it just preserves it going forward. With the town reports, which is not this project, we're looking at one complete set. This is a particularly unique 1890 directory that we want to completely restore, make sure it's salvageable for years in the future.
Great. Oh, so any questions on that article? Sorry. Okay, Article 10, motion 3.
Motion 3 seeks funding of $10,000 for an historical resources project proposed by the town manager's office to restore the nearly 100-year-old furniture in Memorial Hall. The project covers the refinishing of the large oak table and 5 ornate wooden chairs.
Great. Questions on this article? Nothing online? Nope. Okay. Motion 4.
Seeks funding of $11,000 for an historical resources project proposed by the town manager's office to repair and preserve several volumes of annual town reports dating back to the late 1800s. Several volumes have been treated with CPA funds awarded last year, and funding will support the restoration of up to 14 additional volumes. The reports have already been digitized but are in danger of disintegrating due to age, use, and acidity. So this is something we've done before, and this is just a follow-up.
Correct. We did it last year with probably about 15, starting in 1872, and we'll probably bring a small request every year up until when the books start to be in fairly good shape by the 30s or 40s. And it's just to make sure we're preserving at least one physical complete set of town reports. I'm sure 50 years from now, people are going to say, oh, we got to do something with these town reports from the 90s that are so old and historic. But right now we're focusing right around the turn of the century. And rather than try to do it comprehensively all at once and take up an enormous amount of money, every year we'd like to knock out 10 or 15 of these, plus any special items that come up like the directory. We have a lot of other records we'll be bringing forward at some point in time. We have some really great payroll records from the 20s and 30s that are great big sheets when we employed chauffeurs and blacksmiths and all sorts of interesting job titles. So more of this will come through every year, probably as a small request to just preserve some physical copies of records.
Great. Motion 5.
Seeks funding of $530,000 for an historical resources project proposed by the Department of Public Works and the Old Parish Preservation Volunteers to undertake recommended site work at the cemetery. A master plan for the centuries-old cemetery was completed in 2022 and provided a blueprint for restoring and preserving this historic asset. Funding will be used to replace the fencing that runs around the perimeter of the 2-acre site to install entrance gates at the 2 points of access to the cemetery and to undertake additional landscape improvements on the parcel. This is, we had them last year where they came in with a master plan, and this is a great project because they do have a master plan, and this is a thought out process where they've done the master plan and they're coming back bit by bit to make the improvements, and we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, and just for people who are new to town meeting, the presentation at town meeting will not be this boring. It will have pictures and plans of what this will look like. So, you know, we're not asking you to spend $500,000 just based on one slide. So, our job will be to convince you of it, and the presentation that's put together is really nice. Motion 6.
Seeks funding of $10,000 for an open space project proposed by the Conservation Commission to be directed to the Conservation Land Fund. Funds would be available for use by the Conservation Commission for the future purchases of real property interest or other land acquisition activities that comply with the Community Preservation Act.
Any questions on this? Do you want to add anything? Great. Okay, motion 7.
Seeks funding of $41,040 for an open space and recreation project proposed by the Town Manager's Office and Veteran Services Office to develop a master plan for the 4-acre park on Chapel Street. The town-owned space was dedicated to disabled veterans following World War II, and the master plan is expected to incorporate healing and contemplative spaces aimed at the veteran community.
Great. Any questions on this motion? Motion 8 and 9.
Motion 8 seeks funding of $10,000 for historical resources project proposed by the Board of Selectmen and the Morse House Subcommittee to hire a consultant to compile and submit the information necessary to have the Morse House considered for listing on the National Register of Historic Places.
And then motion 9.
And motion 9 seeks funding of $192,000 for an historical resources project proposed by the Board of Selectmen and the Morse House Subcommittee to undertake the rehabilitation of the building's exterior. Elements to be restored or preserved include the foundation, clapboard siding, windows, doors, and other exterior elements.
Great. Questions on these motions? You're all right. Okay. Yep, so this is just a reminder that the annual and the special, starts Monday, May 8th at 6:30 at the high school auditorium. If you're new to town meeting, we ask to get there a few minutes early so we can start on time. We do need a quorum to start, so that's important. Mr. Manager, if you have any other.
No, I think that's it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone at home. This presentation will be available, first thing in the morning. If you have any friends who are town meeting members that didn't get a chance to see it, we'll have it up on the town's website and social media sites. We'll be getting it out in an email to town meeting members. And remember, any questions that come up about this presentation or any of the other articles or budgets that we've gone through, you can always contact the manager's office or any town department. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, and thank you, everyone who joined us remotely as well.
Thank you.
Great. John, thanks.